On September 9, 2004, a jury in Nashville, Tennessee found a man guilty of murdering his own brother, the brother he had grown up with, shared a bedroom with for 16 years, stood beside at his wedding, held his newborn children in his arms. When the verdict was read, the killer looked at his sister-in-law, his dead brother's wife, and he smiled. Not a smirk, not a nervous reaction, a smile. I have prosecuted killers for 53 years. That smile, right there, was the single most chilling thing I have ever seen in a courtroom. This is the story of Robert and Thomas Dalton. And what a piece of paper worth $4 million does to a man's soul. But before I tell you how it ended, let me tell you how it started. Because this story does not begin with greed. It begins with a father, a dying father, and the one decision he made in his final weeks, that he never knew would cost his son his life. August 2003. Walter Dalton, 79 years old, was dying of pancreatic cancer in a hospice in Nashville, Tennessee. He had two sons. Robert, the older one, 52 years old, steady, reliable, a man who had spent 30 years building his father's hardware business from a small shop into a company worth $4 million. And Thomas, the younger one, 48 years old, charming, restless, always chasing the next big thing. 3 failed businesses, 2 divorces, always borrowing money, always promising to pay it back. Walter Dalton loved both his sons equally. He told them this his entire life. But in his final weeks, he made a decision that was not equal at all. And Thomas Dalton, when he found out, could not accept it. Walter Dalton had started Dalton Hardware in 1961, a small shop on Commerce Street in Nashville. Nothing fancy. Tools, nails, paint supplies. He worked 6 days a week for 40 years. Robert joined the business straight out of high school. Never went to college, didn't want to. He wanted to build something with his hands, the way his father had. And he did. By 2003, Dalton Hardware had 3 locations, 22 employees, $4 million in assets, real estate, equipment, inventory, everything Robert had poured his life into. Thomas, the younger brother, had tried to join the business twice. First time in 1988, lasted 8 months, said it was too slow, too boring, left to start a restaurant. Restaurant failed in 2 years. Second time in 1995, lasted 14 months. This time there were problems, missing inventory, accounting discrepancies. Walter never accused Thomas directly. He just quietly asked him to leave, gave him $50,000 and told him to find his own path. Thomas burned through that money in 18 months. By 2003, Thomas Dalton was living in a rented apartment, behind on child support from his second divorce, driving a car with a cracked windshield, calling his father every week asking for small loans. Walter always sent something. He was a father. That's what fathers do. But in August 2003, lying in that hospice bed, Walter Dalton made his final decision. He called his attorney, and he rewrote his will. The new will was simple, almost brutally simple. Robert Dalton, the business, the real estate, all $4 million in assets, everything. Thomas Dalton, $200,000, cash, clean, no strings. Walter's reasoning, according to his attorney, was straightforward. Robert had built the business. Robert had earned it. Thomas had been given chances and squandered them. $200,000 was more than fair. It was generous. Walter died on September 3, 2003. Peacefully. His 2 sons at his bedside. The will was read 1 week later. Robert sat quietly and nodded. He had not known the details beforehand. He was grateful and guilty at the same time. That was Robert's nature. Thomas sat completely still through the reading. Did not speak. Did not react. When it was over, he stood up, shook his brother's hand, said, "Congratulations," and walked out. Robert told me later, the handshake was wrong. Tom has always been warm, always a hugger. That handshake, it felt like a door closing. Robert ignored the feeling. He shouldn't have. 3 weeks later, Thomas hired an attorney and filed a legal challenge to the will. He claimed their father had not been of sound mind. when he rewrote it, that Robert had manipulated a dying old man, that the will was fraudulent. The challenge was dismissed within 2 months. Walter's mental competency was well documented. His hospice physicians testified he was completely lucid until his final days. Thomas lost, and something inside him broke. After the legal challenge failed, Thomas Dalton became a different man. He stopped calling Robert, stopped attending family events. His children, Robert's niece and nephew, stopped seeing their uncle entirely. Robert tried to reach out multiple times. He offered Thomas a job at the hardware store. A real job, good salary, no charity, actual work. Thomas never responded. Robert's wife Carol told me. Rob felt so guilty. He kept saying, "Dad gave me everything and gave Tom nothing. It wasn't fair." He wanted to make it right. I told him, "You didn't write that will, Walter did." But Rob, he couldn't let it go. In early 2004, Robert did something that was extraordinarily generous and extraordinarily naive. He called Thomas and offered him $500,000 cash out of his own pocket, on top of the $200,000 from the will, $700,000 total. He said, "Tom, I don't want this between us. Take it, please. We're brothers." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I don't want your charity, Rob. I want what's mine." Robert said, "Tom, the will was Dad's decision." Thomas hung up. That was the last conversation they ever had. 4 months later, on a Thursday evening in September 2004, Robert Dalton left his hardware store on Commerce Street at 7:15 p.m. He walked to his car in the back parking lot. He never made it home. Robert Dalton was found by a delivery driver at 7:48 p.m., slumped against his car in the back parking lot. Single gunshot wound to the chest. Close range. He was alive when paramedics arrived. Barely. He died in surgery at Vanderbilt University Medical Center at 11:23 p.m. Carol was holding his hand. The parking lot had no security cameras. The hardware store's camera covered the front entrance only. No witnesses came forward initially. Lead detective, James Whitfield, experienced homicide investigator, told me later that his first instinct within 24 hours was Thomas Dalton. "In my experience," he said, "when a wealthy man is murdered, you follow the money first. Always follow the money." Thomas Dalton was brought in for questioning. Within 48 hours, he was cooperative, almost too cooperative, calm, sad, said all the right things. "Rob was my brother. I loved him. Yes, we had disagreements, family stuff, but I would never." He had an alibi. He claimed he was at a bar called Rusty's Tavern, on the west side of Nashville, from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. that evening. The bartender confirmed it. 2 regulars confirmed it. Thomas Dalton was released. But Detective Whitfield wasn't satisfied. He pulled Thomas's phone records, and he found something interesting. 3 calls in the week before the murder, to a number registered to a man named Curtis Briggs, a man with 2 prior convictions, one for armed robbery, one for aggravated assault, a man who had absolutely no reason to be talking to a hardware store heir. From Nashville, Tennessee, Curtis Briggs was 34 years old, living in a motel on the outskirts of Nashville. No steady job, no fixed address. When detectives knocked on his motel room door, he ran, literally ran out the back window, got 3 blocks before they caught him. Innocent people do not run. In the interrogation room, Curtis Briggs lasted 45 minutes. Before he started talking, he told detectives that Thomas Dalton had contacted him through a mutual acquaintance. 6 weeks before the murder, Thomas had offered him $15,000 to kill Robert, $10,000 up front, $5,000 after. Curtis said he had taken the $10,000, done the job, and was still waiting for the remaining $5,000. When detectives knocked on his door, Thomas had never paid the rest. "I've seen a lot of things in 53 years, but hiring someone to kill your brother, and then refusing to pay the final installment, that tells you everything you need to know about Thomas Dalton's character." Curtis Briggs cooperated fully. He gave us the text messages. He gave us the burner phone Thomas had used. He gave us the location where the cash was handed over, a parking lot off Interstate 40, which we confirmed through traffic camera footage. Thomas Dalton's alibi at Rusty's Tavern was carefully constructed. He had been there, yes. But he had left at 6:45 p.m. Returned at 7:50 p.m. The bartender, a friend of Thomas, had lied for him. When confronted with the traffic footage, the bartender broke within minutes. Thomas Dalton was arrested on October 12, 2004, charged with first-degree murder for hire. Thomas Dalton's defense was creative. I'll give his attorney credit for that. They argued that Curtis Briggs was lying, a career criminal making a deal to save himself. They attacked the text messages, claimed they were misinterpreted. They painted Thomas as a grieving brother, wrongfully accused. Thomas took the stand. He was, I will say this honestly, a compelling witness, charming, emotional, believable. He cried when he talked about Robert. Real tears, or real enough. For 2 days I watched those jurors soften. Then I cross-examined him. I asked him one question that I had saved. For exactly this moment. I said, Mr. Dalton, your brother offered you $500,000 out of his own pocket, freely given. You refused it. 3 months later he was dead. Help me understand. What exactly was it that you wanted, that $500,000 couldn't buy? Thomas Dalton opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. His attorney objected. The judge overruled. Thomas said, it wasn't about the money. I said, no, it wasn't, was it? It was about the fact that your father chose your brother over you, and you could not forgive either of them for that. His attorney objected again. The judge sustained it that time, but the jury had heard it, and they had seen Thomas Dalton's face. In the 3 seconds before the objection, that face told them everything. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. Guilty. First-degree murder. Thomas Dalton was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Curtis Briggs received a reduced sentence, 12 years, for his cooperation. He served 8. The bartender who lied, charged with obstruction of justice, 18 months probation. Carol Dalton, Robert's widow, received the full inheritance. The hardware stores, the real estate, everything. She kept the business running for 11 more years, before selling it. She said, I kept it open because Rob built it, and I wasn't going to let what Thomas did take that away from him too. Thomas and Robert's children, cousins who had grown up together, never spoke again after the trial. That generation of the Dalton family, finished, over a will. Walter Dalton had 2 sons. He loved them both equally his entire life. His final act, trying to be fair, ended with 1 son dead, and 1 son in prison. I think about Walter sometimes. I think about whether he knew, somewhere in those final weeks, that what he was doing might cause trouble. I think he knew. I think he hoped he was wrong. He wasn't. $4 million. That's what this was about. $4 million and a father's decision. That 1 son accepted, and 1 son could not. Robert Dalton never wanted a fight. He offered his brother $700,000, just to keep the peace. $700,000, to keep his brother. Thomas said no. In the end, Thomas Dalton didn't just lose the inheritance. He lost his brother, his freedom, his children's respect, his own name. All of it, for a piece of paper that never even had his name on it. Greed is a strange thing, folks. It doesn't just take what you have. It takes everything you are. I'm Harold Whitmore. I'll see you in the next case.